Contagion is a 2011 release thriller directed by Steven Soderbergh.
It's a story of a worldwide pandemic, pretty familiar territory at the moment. It starts with a character played by Gwyneth Paltrow, who's a businesswoman on a trip to China, and she comes home feeling rather unwell, and within a couple of days, she's rushed into hospital, and then sadly passes away. Yeah, they're not sure really what has caused her death at first. They think it's one thing, but then it clearly isn't. And then other people who've come into contact with her start to become ill. So she has a husband and a son, and the son rapidly goes downhill. And the husband, who's played by Matt Damon, doesn't. It turns out that some people are immune to this virus. Yeah, sort of an ensemble piece. It's not really a story as such, shall we say. It is. We follow different characters. So there's Lawrence Fishburne and Kate Winslet, who played doctors with the CDC. They're tracking this disease and trying to find out where it originated, what's causing it, who's got it, and trying to contain it. Anyone living on planet Earth right now is more than familiar with what happens when there's a worldwide pandemic. Yeah, and then you've got Jude Law, who plays a kind of like a conspiracy theorist who has like his own website and he does videos all the time. Kind of spreads a little bit of misinformation about something that may be able to cure the disease. You've got Marion Cotillard, who's with the World Health Organization. She goes to Hong Kong. There's a bit of a sort of a subplot with her where she kind of gets kidnapped and lives in a sort of small village with some locals. Yeah, it is basically the story of this virus spreading, them trying to stop the spread of it. Phrases like social distancing, which, we're all very much familiar with now. But personally, before coronavirus, I'd never heard of that phrase, but it is in this movie. So obviously it's a thing. I hadn't seen it before this. It's quite scary, to be honest. But, the virus in the film is a lot worse than the coronavirus. Not that coronavirus is a picnic, but it's not as deadly as the virus in the film, fortunately. So you do see a sort of breakdown of society. There's lots of looting and things like that, and empty streets, and it's a scary watch if you're if you're up for scaring yourself with a bit of a sort of reality dose, then go for it.
It's interesting you say that, actually, because I had seen this before. Watching it again today, I realised it was the one I was thinking of, because there's another one that came out. Was it Outbreak that came out in the mid-90s with Dustin Hoffman? I'd seen that one as well. I couldn't remember if this was that one, and I couldn't remember which one had a terrible, annoying ending, and that must have been that one, not this one. But weirdly, I didn't find this that terrifying. I can't remember if I found it that terrifying last time. What's interesting about this one, quite similarly to, we obviously covered Threads, and while we were recording that video, you suggested that was like a handbook for what would happen in a nuclear war or a nuclear bomb being dropped. And this one now, strangely, is a little bit like that. This is very realistic, this one, and they clearly did their research. And I was reading an interview with Scott Burns, who wrote the screenplay with Steven Soderbergh, that they did a lot of research with the CDC. He knew different scientists, and he'd seen a TED talk, I think, by a scientist that was suggesting all this kind of stuff and what we could look out for. And a lot of the doctors were saying, not if this happens, but when this happens. And this has been something that's obviously been calculated and researched and looked into for many, many years. Although, we are now going through what this film depicts, I didn't find this film as terrifying as Threads was. And I don't know if that's because we are now living it, and obviously this is what we're going through is not quite as terrifying. So when you watch a film that you think, well, that could be a possibility, that's quite terrifying, but when it actually happens, because it's not, and I'm not trying to downplay our current virus, because our current virus, it is for many people very terrifying, but this film didn't feel that terrifying, and I think I know why. I think partly that's because we are currently going through this situation, but also I think there is. I really like this film. I think it's a really good film, but there's two streams going on in this film. So Kate Winslet, for instance, who works for CDC, she is like the reality part of this film. She's talking about clusters and social distancing, and she has this wonderful speech where she's walking with someone and she says, you touch your face 1,000 to 3,000 times a day, and these are all things that people have spoken about at the moment, and she feels very real. Jude Law, however, is like the Hollywood side of the film, and I think this film does have a Hollywood side to it, and I think that's what, for me, makes it slightly less terrifying than, say, Threads, which the whole thing in Threads is absolutely terrifying. In this, Jude Law he's he is the conspiracy theorist. He's the one who thinks it's like some, government plan, or big pharmaceuticals are all kind of colluding with each other to make a virus, or they're faking you with it, or they're kind of misdirecting you with a fake virus and all this kind of stuff. I mean, he is, interestingly, he's also the blogger. And there's a point at the beginning of the film that mentions, I mean, this is 9 years ago, this film now, so it's quite old, but he does mention Twitter and YouTube, which is quite scary how old those things are as well. And I think I was reading an interview with Steven Soderbergh, and he said the interesting thing with this film is it explores both how viruses spread, but then also how media spreads as well. And so Jude Law is kind of the representation of social media. But he's that kind of Hollywood cliche, which I think that's what kind of took me out of this being completely terrifying.
Yeah.
I suppose also because in their world, in the film's world, it goes slightly more extreme. They go to the whole, rubbish on the streets. We still have operations going on. We still have people delivering things to everyone. But there's a lot of stuff in there that's so eerily real, like when they show the shots of like airports empty and businesses empty and towns empty and all that kind of stuff, which feels so real. It's a very interesting film. I think there's a lot in here that feels so real to what we're going through at the moment.
I mean, I think I watched it, I think it was on TV at the end of March, I think, so we were already in lockdown, and obviously other countries have been experiencing it worse than us for a couple of weeks. Lots was known about the virus and the effects of it and the sort of death rate of it. I think if I'd watched it just as it was starting and not a lot was known about it, it would then make you think, oh Christ, where's this going to go? But because we were already sort of there and we knew more about the virus, it almost makes you grateful that it isn't that bad. While it obviously is awful and it's still going on, no virus would be the ideal, wouldn't it?
I think my favourite parts of the film, I think Kate Winslet is fantastic in this film. Her thread, and Lawrence Fishburne, and also Jennifer Ehle, who I didn't even realise that was Jennifer Ehle. She was amazing in this film. She plays the scientist. Is it Ella? Or Ellie?
Yeah.
She's British. I mean, because I didn't realise, because she has obviously an American accent. It was only when I read about her later, I was like, oh God, it is her. Because I remember her in the 90s.
Was she Pride and Prejudice, wasn't she?
She was Pride and Prejudice, but she was in a really good show. I think it was her first show called Chamomile Lawn, which was an old show on Channel 4, I think, in the 90s. Really, really good show. And she was blonde in that. That's possibly why I didn't. And obviously she was much younger. I was just like, of course, that's who it is. And I thought she was really good. But so all their bits, and Elliot Gould, who's in there as well, he's in there for a little bit. All their threads, I think, are really good. And in fact, the beginning of the film was it felt so similar to what we're going through, how it obviously came out of China. And then, bits slowly it starts to, go elsewhere. And at first they don't know, and a couple of people have it. That stuff all felt so like what we were experiencing at the beginning of this all. I remember the first news article that we had that really kind of brought it home, literally, was when I think the first plane load from Wuhan came over, and they sent them up to a hospital, was it in Leicester or somewhere up north, and you saw the coaches with the police escort. That was the first time it kind of came here, but we were still a little bit in the dark, a little bit.
It was all still just very bizarre, wasn't it? You thought, oh well, anyone that's coming in, they're putting into quarantine, so it'll be fine.
You felt a little bit like what they were doing with when Ebola happened. It was that whole. It still felt so far away, and even although they came to this country, it was far enough away. It wasn't going to hit, and so that part of the film, I think, is very authentic. It feels like exactly what we are going through, and probably it was interesting reading again this interview I found with the writer, and how New York itself went through quite similar things with SARS and H1N1, which we didn't go through here. It seemed to have more of an impact out there. It's also interesting how apparently scientists find a new virus every week in their laboratories, which is just
that's reassuring.
Yeah, that's reassuring. The science behind what we are currently going through and what the film is showing is just really interesting and pretty much spot on. And apparently a lot of the scientists lauded this film when it came out because it was so realistic. But then, like you say, there's a few things in here which is going to happen, I suppose, in any film, especially an American film. You're going to start kind of getting a little bit closer to cliche territory. Yeah. Marion Cotillard, who is a great actress as well. Her stuff I felt was so kind of throwaway. It's very odd because she's not in it much, and there's a whole scene which is kind of montaged, so she's not talking, and
No.
then her whole sequence is very odd. But then I read that apparently Steven Soderbergh cut 45 minutes out of the film. So I think there's a lot of other bits and pieces that existed that don't exist in the film that we can see now. It's a really good film, and definitely the closest one I can think of would be Threads. But then Threads is really depressing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that shows the complete collapse of society, doesn't it? So
Completely, yeah.
which
yeah.
This one doesn't.
So it's directed by Steven Soderbergh, who I think is kind of known for these big ensemble pieces. It plays out a little bit. It's a bit like, if you know, like films like Robert Altman does these kind of big ensemble pieces. Steven Soderbergh, he's an interesting director because he's kind of done lots of different films over his career. He does a lot of kind of, maybe not art house, but he does, you know, kind of experimental films at times. But then he's also happy doing big Hollywood films like, you know, the Ocean series.
Yeah.
He started out life with Sex, Lies and Videotapes, which is maybe a little bit more artistic than some of the Hollywood flair, which is a very good film.
I think he seems comfortable in both.
He seems very comfortable in both worlds, yeah.
And of course, he won an Oscar for directing Traffic, which is it almost is a little bit arty. But obviously, it is a big Hollywood film with loads of big names in it.
Yeah, it's the kind of the multiple stories going on at one time, and kind of all threading along and interlinking at different times. I think he's clearly a very accomplished director. But strangely, if you look at interviews around this time, this was the time he was thinking of retiring. But he's still making films today. So
he is, yeah.
That one didn't work out for him, did it?
No.
So
no, I vaguely remember that now, actually, in talking about retiring.
It's very good, this film. I really enjoyed it. And like I said, now I've seen it a couple of times. I recommend it if you haven't seen it.
Absolutely. It's a well-made film. If you are of a sort of nervous disposition, and this whole lockdown virus business is making you slightly worried, then give it a miss, I would say. Because it's not going to make you feel any better about our current situation.
Or it will make you feel better because this is not quite as bad. I mean,
well, yeah, as I said earlier, it's not as bad as the movie, so it could have the opposite effect. But well, it's up to you whether you want to take that risk.
I think the main difference here scientifically is that this one seems to, you get it very quickly on this one.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because it passes. The whole setup is very similar to what we currently have. It's on surfaces. You know, if you touch a surface that someone else has touched, and that's how they do the whole. I mean, we talked about, you know, so Kate Winslet and Marion Cotillard both are playing similar characters, and they're kind of these kind of virus detectives, and they go through and they're kind of trying to work out where it started from. Who gets it. There's a great scene with Kate Winslet when she finds out that this man has picked up Gwyneth Paltrow from the airport. So, of course, he was in the car with her. He could have it. She phones him. He's on a bus, and he happens to be, like, coughing his guts up. So she's like, quick, get off the bus. Don't talk to anyone. Don't touch anyone. We're going to come. We'll come over to you. We'll be there in a second. And, of course, he, like, on his way getting off the bus, he stumbles and touches a pillar, a
coughs
post.
all over his hand.
Coughs all over his hand.
Yeah,
exactly. And then Kate Winslet gets there, and then they kind of, that's how they work that out. Marianne Cotillard, on the other hand, she goes to China, she goes to Hong Kong, and she's able to look at, you know, CCTV footage and see where Gwyneth Paltrow has been, who she's spoken to, who she's touched, and they follow her that way. And even those things are being, you know, a lot of places are looking now at how to follow people, how to track people with mobile phone technology and CCTV and all this kind of stuff. So it does feel very like, I'm not doing us any favour if you are in a nervous position. I'm not making it any better for you. But what I was saying is that, you know, this one in the film seems to be, it moves faster than our current one.
Yeah.
The incubation time seems to be, or less actually. Ours is longer.
Oh yeah, once people get it, they get it
straight
rapidly.
away, and they and plus they all seem to die.
Well, I was trying to remember whether I don't know if they ever talk about death rate. I think they must do. I don't think everybody dies, but yeah, it's not good if you get it.
It's almost like everyone dies in this film except Matt Damon. He's immune to it.
Well, yeah, he's immune, and obviously they then discover that some people have natural immunity to it, which is nice for them.
Very nice
So
for them. So I definitely would recommend this film. If you've not seen it, then go and check it out. It's readily available on Amazon Prime.
before it popped up on Amazon Prime, I was, because lots of people were talking about it and were watching it. I thought, oh yeah, I want to check that out now. But it was very difficult to find a copy of it. Obviously, there's no shops open, so I was having a look on eBay, and of course, copies on eBay were going for stupid money. So I was like, well, I'm not that desperate to see it. But yeah, then I noticed it was on ITV2, so I checked it out there, and of course, a week or two later, it then popped up on Amazon. So yeah, if you've got Amazon, check it out on there while you can.
So that was Contagion, and as always, if you enjoyed the video, let us know in the comments below.
Push the subscribe button there, and don't forget to hit the bell for notifications. There's some other videos to check out over here. Come and find us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, and join us next week for another video.